All right, welcome to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. Today is Wheel of Time Day, so we are on Chapter 30 of A Crown of Swords.
And we'll try to get through, I think it's chapter 33 by the end of this. So,
Yeah, well, some of this will go pretty quick, I think. Chapter 30, um, the main thing of interest to me is what and how Elayne is finally pushed into asserting herself as a real Aes Sedai. Um, and that when she does, the others just fall in line. So you talk a lot about how women are coalitional, and the tower and the groupings are uh, a good illustration of that. But they're also the Aes Sedai are also very hierarchical, and
yeah.
it is. We talked a little bit about last time, I think, about the very complicated social rules for and you know societal norms can become even more rigid than law when they go on long enough.
Well, we've got a couple things going on here because of the way their society is set up. For good or bad, or for rational or nonsensical. If she was raised to the shawl the traditional way, she automatically would be above all of these women except Nynaeve
Hmm.
because she is stronger in the power, even though she would be a brand new Aes Sedai. And as a defense mechanism, it only makes sense for the ones that are here to put their hands over their ears and go la 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 to her being raised to the shawl,
Hmm.
because otherwise they unconsciously know they would be giving up their position. This is their only defense. This is their only way to have any sway by the way they're set up.
There is also an element of just not being able to grasp the idea of something being so different, the
Mm-hmm.
raising by declaration and instead of the way it's usually done. So they're also just going to reflexively not consider them real Aes Sedai because they are so bound by tradition. Although the raising is an instance where it is actual law going along with societal norms that are as rigid as law.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well, it's funny because we do it nowadays too. We have to follow an executive order under certain situations, but we all look at it differently than an amendment that went through the the Congress.
mhm. um, well, that is another, and it's an example of that he's used before of, well, you don't necessarily have to. And the the problem that Elayne basically sees is that she's accepting their assumption in the same way that uh Moggy accepted um that the caller in the dream world was real and could hold her.
Mm-hmm.
And if she just didn't accept it, then she wouldn't be, boxed into this corner.
Well, and that's crazy because now we've kind of got a circular thing going because the collar can help the wrist wearer have influence over the collared mind, but just not accepting it would have made it go away. But you can't not accept it because someone has control over your mind,
Yep.
even if it's not just actual mind control, but something to the extent of every time they're trying to focus, you blast them with pain or.
Uh, Other than that, my only other thought on this chapter is it is one of those times where Elayne is written very well and is very enjoyable to read. The way she handles the whole scene. Then we get a little Moghidian, which I assume you like because you said that she's one of your favorite Forsaken
Mm-hmm.
because she's written so well and you get so much of her.
You get so much of her, and it's uh, she's like a there when I think of Marvel heroes, there's like two different groups for me. There's the ones that made the Endgame movies, and there's like the Daredevils of the world, where they're kind of just really crafty normal people
Mhm.
with a little bit something to overcome and a little bit of extra something else. And she's kind of like the Daredevil of the Forsaken. She knows her limitations,
Mhm.
so she works around them. Whereas someone like Robin was so arrogant that he pretty much pranced around like he was invincible. Bilal was even worse. Bilal was killed by his pride, real early on.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, which which is why
I think
the
that's why I might have liked Asmodean a little bit too, because he was kind of like that, even though he was a icky dude.
in this scene you get her basically how far she's fallen, how much she uh is emotionally upset by her situation because that she's not being able to play to her strengths because she's under the control of someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
and
but presumably, and I got a little bit of this, someone who knows her strengths and is going to use them to his advantage.
yeah, that's true. But there's always going to be an element of um I didn't choose this, so I'm not controlling as many variables as I would like. But then also uh her seething anger at Nyneave that makes her act rather rashly here, which then throws her into another bit of a irate situation and state of mind because she realizes, oh crap, what have I done? And you know, damn you for making me do it. Damn you for making me so mad that I did it.
And I like how she reflects that so much would be easier if she was better at compulsion, but she proved earlier with Leandrin that someone even of this day that had a talent for compulsion, which was Leandrin, she was so much better than her.
Yeah.
It just shows the difference in standard from the Age of Legends to now.
And then we get to chapter 31, which is one of the big ones we were trying to get to and why we stopped where we stopped last time. Because Nynaeve finally gets her land moment. Um, and again, it's not an accident the way these things get set up. And we mentioned before where it was kind of building to this. Um, and that part of breaking her block is thinking about land
Mm-hmm.
uh, in the moment, but then that was already part of the progression to where she was headed to, that all the groundwork would have been done so that in this moment she could actually surrender.
Mm-hmm.
And not just in the moment where she thinks she's going to die, uh but well, not thinks she's using up her little air pocket and she's her vision's starting to go. She is about to pass out uh from lack of oxygen. Um, but then when she gets back to the surface and she continues to channel just reflexively, it is it is now so much a part of her that it
Mm-hmm.
takes her a while to even consciously realize, oh crap, I'm not angry. And I'm reflexively and easily throwing weaves around.
Mm-hmm. Well, we see this in a lot of modern research with psychedelics and things like PTSD. where people have developed blocks that prevent them from doing things, and in some cases make them comatose, but then you take them out of their mind in some way, shape, or form, which she did by almost passing out, and just the sheer desperation of the moment. And then all of a sudden you can flip a switch and it's like, oh my, I'm a normal human being.
It kind of you just reminded me of that cool story. Who was that? Williamson? Was he the one who mentioned the story of the comatose men in the
Yes,
Blitz?
yes, yes. Where did he get that from? Alex Hormozy, maybe? I don't know. Somewhere along the no, David Smith Lane is where he got that from. So for those that don't know the story, and I'm going to get it kind of the shorthand version in the secondhand from the secondhand telling, is these guys were mentally basically comatose in mental hospitals during World War II, and when the Blitzkrieg happened, they needed drivers, ambulance drivers, and fire truck drivers, because everything was burning and people were getting hurt, and men was short because they were off to war. And all of a sudden, these men that were comatose with depression and other mental illness just got up and started driving trucks because they had a purpose. And this really is kind of a version of that, because not only was she looking for survival, but we have the land effect as well, where she actually finds purpose in someone else other than herself for really the first time on a macro level. I mean, she did it with everybody that's dying, and that's why she's able to channel to help them live, because she has a momentary purpose. It's not the anger. The anger was
Mhm.
just a crutch. It was the desperation, as we talked about in the last episode.
Yeah.
It was the desperation to where she had to surrender. Her mind went to a point where she could no longer dig her heels in. Someone's life is on the line. In this case, my life is on the line. We might have seen this earlier if he wasn't such a good story writer, when Moghidian was twisting her up into a knot, except Moghidian also shielded her. So she couldn't do it when she was just facing her, but when it came to the point where she was about to break, it might have happened.
Hmm.
Which you see it
That's
in
a
the
good point.
tactics of the people trying to break blocks with Theodrin and her
Yeah, oh,
stories
yeah,
about her.
yeah.
You see that it's almost like trying to bring them into a moment of desperation where nothing in you can work except you needing to use the power.
Um,
They
I
just
had a
need to
thought.
be
It's
more
going to.
aggressive.
Oh, yeah, and what you're just talking about, there's a parallel there with Lan as well, that um, you know, he's fully expecting that this is not going to work. Marl's not going to be able to keep him alive, and he's going to be dead within a year. Um, but he very quickly finds purpose with Nyneave.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what was I gonna say?
I don't know.
I I do like the kind of the flip switching with Nynaeve. Yeah, when they're in private, when she's with Lan and she goes from literally hitting him to I am serene, I am cool, we are going to talk about this calmly like adults, with you being the one who was throwing the tantrum. Um, and then where is it? No, I've gone too far. Uh, the moment where Lan is mentioning she who shall not be named is gonna know what's going on if we're man and wife, because you know what men and women do. And she says, is there a way she can know that it's me? Uh um Any other thoughts on that? I mean, I feel like we've already set it up pretty well in the other times we've talked about the lead up to this moment. Because then it switches back to Elayne.
No, I had a thought and it escaped while we were going over the other things. So I'll rudely interrupt us if it pops back in.
But we get a moment of Matt here, but it's mostly an Elayne chapter. Um, or half a chapter. It it is nice to see her thought process when Matt barges in, and there is that reflexive moment of smugness. Um, but then she can feel Birgitti's disappointment, and that actually makes her shift to a more uh, unnatural state of at least a smidge of humility. Um, I also like the way it ends with a bit of a bombshell with Reanne telling them how old she is, and Marilo fainted dead away. Um, and it's one of those nuggets that makes the whole series fun because it ties into several things that have already kind of been uh, sprinkled along the way when it comes to Aes Sedai ages and why that is and how that connects to other things.
I remember my thought.
Okay.
I wanted to poo poo on the series
Ugh.
because okay, so uh in my venture into people who actually like the series thoughts, came across one thing, and apparently, you know that opening scene where Egwene's pushed into the river,
Uh-huh.
that's supposed to be a metaphor for surrendering to the power. If this was the case, Nynaeve would never have had a block because her problem was she could not surrender. She would never have had her hair braided because she would never have been able to surrender to the river. That's Nynaeve's problem. That's her whole character in the beginning.
Uh,
And I'm like, okay, you made this wonderful metaphor, but then you took an entire chunk of storyline out for one of your most important characters because that's the point of Nynaeve. She could not
yeah.
surrender. And here she had to surrender to survive.
Yeah.
So in the post of the person, I think it was a YouTube video that was like praising it. It was like little nuggets of things that you might not have noticed. And I'm like, I didn't notice it because it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't recall at any point in the series um Moraine talking about how you embrace Saidar.
She does.
So
She does. She has a
she
moment with
does.
Egwene. Yeah.
I mean, I knew she should
I
have
think
with
I think so. Or am I just imagining my images from my head from the books into the show? I have to do the rewatch because
the
theoretically we're getting the new series soon, but
yeah.
although we don't have an official trailer yet. But
I'm just wondering how they expected anyone to connect those dots. If you're going to have this big metaphor, it needs to be understandable. And
well, it
here
is
we
if it's explained, except that there's this huge plot hole that Nynaeve is supposed to have a block. Although you really don't get a block from her anyways, you just get that she doesn't know what she's doing until she needed it against not Tame, Logain, because Lan was dying.
yeah. Wow. That made my headache worse.
Uh, so it was worth
All
the
right.
rude introduction. intrusion. Back to 412 years old.
Yep. And then chapter 32 is a lengthy chapter.
And
Um,
this is one of those just set up chapters for payoff later, which we kind of discussed before uh we came on air here. No spoilers, but this sets up what I think is one of the most interesting plot lines from the later books. It kind of
yes.
gets it going, and then it takes a hiatus for a while, and then it comes back, and it's actually one of the more interesting parts.
And um, I like the setup here with um Elida crashing back to Earth when Alviren lays out for her just how magnificent the disasters are that she has orchestrated here with the disaster with Rand and all the terribleness that happened there, and then the impending disaster at the Black Tower. Um, because in her and the other Reds' arrogance, there couldn't possibly be any man who would want this, which makes no sense if you understand men, which Reds clearly do not.
Mm-hmm.
That it it makes no sense that you would risk your life to catch crab, but men do it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, all of the most dangerous occupations are done by men. It's what they do. So, yeah, if someone's taking away at least part of the stigma for men channeling and putting the call out there to, hey, come be something, the old army slogan when we were growing up, be all you can be,
Mm-hmm.
that appealed to young men for a reason.
Well, now you can be everything, including a woman.
Yeah. Yep. Now you can. Um, so she's in an interesting mental state when Alviren smacks her down and she has to basically humiliate herself in order to keep what she values most, which is her power. And that
Does like
leads
the
her,
power.
yeah. And so because she is so narcissistic, she's she's easy to manipulate. Uh, try not to make a modern political corollary because I don't want to get into it. But if,
We all know who you're talking about, and we all know
yeah,
his shortcomings were based on that.
if
But also
if
his strengths were
you're,
based on that. Listen to some of our other episodes where we give him the
yeah.
benefit of the doubt in certain things.
So if you're a um, i- think of the classic schoolyard bully. If you're a bully because of this one glaring character flaw, then it's easy to manipulate. And it's also easy to push back if, oh, you're the schoolyard bully because you have short man syndrome. So
Mm-hmm.
if I humiliate you based on that, then you can be pushed down or manipulated, which Alviren is very capable of doing because of how intelligent she is. But then she kind of doesn't take into account that yes, you can do this because she is so much this way, but because she is so much this way, she's going to try and twist and try and work around and try and take you down. So Although I guess Alviarin does seem to know that because you do get that short little POV of her, and she's kind of surprised that actually worked. That for all her serene coldness, she was internally scared this was going to backfire. Um, but then what puts a light on this path is her thought process, the way you see her thought process and the steps that she starts to take when she realizes, wait, my foretelling, yeah, it must have said this. Well, it didn't. That's your reading into it, and you are so certain of your own awesomeness that you have absolutely convinced yourself. I hadn't thought about this. You are so convinced of your own awesomeness, you have absolutely convinced yourself of something that did not happen. And much the same way that in the next chapter, Rand is so absolutely convinced of his terribleness, he has convinced himself something happened that didn't happen. And so that leads her, you know, down these steps that she lays out for herself to say, aha, yes, this is what I need to do and it will work because I have foretold it. And then because she's operating on false assumptions and she's not giving out all the information, which when she goes to Sain, then she also has to lay out a bunch of steps. Although she's a little more locked in logically because that's the way she thinks. So she doesn't twist what Elayne is saying, but she is having to fill in gaps. Which leads us to our first and one of the few sympathetic Reds, uh, where you can understand where she's coming from, uh, and she isn't as man-hating queen bee as all the other Reds we've met. So Havar is one of those fun late edition characters.
Well, that's the one I was talking about, setting up for later, the storyline.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. She flows into a very interesting storyline. Um, all right, and now we get to a bath. Let's pause for a second. I need to refill my water. All right. So the chapter we were trying to get to, a lot of stuff going on here. Um, I can't remember if I mentioned before when we were recording during spoilery time. But I told you that this chapter, the first several times I read it, was always a little off to me because it's hard to understand until you've had at least had to deal with it with some element of your own. Um, how in the world could Rand think so little of himself that he convinces himself he did something that horrible? And he is fully convinced that he raped men. That's and he is clearly not of the mentality of someone who would ever even consider that.
Well, I
And you
mean, you look at the last couple of years of his life, he's done so many horrible things that you would say that 2 years ago, 3 years ago, Rand would never have done in the name
true,
of. And
true.
then you look at the situation with the passion, and I mean, I'm assuming just by the way it was laid out, that it was probably a little bit of rough sex. It was there was some emotion behind it. And when you're not completely there mentally, which he wasn't, he was in the throes of passion, you you pound a little harder than you normally would have. I put up the ultimate back and back fitness and performance manual there because hopefully he as they would say broke her back. Uh,
Warm up properly here. All right.
well, the female orgasm, one of the the unconscious, unavoidable uh, reflexes is the back arch. So here's your advice from Sexy Time with Sam: never get fooled by a fake orgasm again, because look for the back arch. But yeah, it's they can't control the fact that they do arch up and their lower back overextends. And he was probably in Pound Town as hard as Rand could Pound Town, and he is a much larger, imposing individual than she would be. I mean, she's not described as a tiny woman, but I mean, he's what, 6'6" and 220 or 230 pounds.
Yup. Yep. We did when we started this, we did comment that he might be a little too jacked there, those arms, but he is a big muscular dude.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well, even Tom, even before he's training with the sword and going through all the hand-to-hand combat he did with the Aiel, and even before all that, way back in the beginning, Tom describes him as not only tall but broad of shoulder. An axe handle lacrosse is what he said. And so he was a big dude when he was a lanky teenager.
yep. Um, but he goes just in these first couple of pages, he's into he's veering into time to be involuntarily committed uh category here with his ranting and raving and talking to himself of he's getting a little Gollum like there.
Well, I guess where I was kind of going with that was not just the rough sex, construing to I did this bad thing. He is 100%, and I think it's on purpose that he has this thought about holding the Sangreal and Lanfear telling him he can even challenge the creator. He is 100% aware of the power dynamic between him and Min.
Yeah.
Because remember, Min's not the Aes Sedai like Elayne. Min's not the maiden of the spear that can channel like Avienda. Min is the barmaid.
Hmm.
And credit to Rand, he's no Bill Clinton to use his power dynamic. He is aware of it, and in his mind, he used it.
Uh, to your point earlier about how uh Rand has been going down this dark trail for a while in uh things that he has done uh because it had to be done, but he regrets it, he doesn't like it, he doesn't like himself for making those calculations when it comes to people. Um and one of the things he's tormenting himself with on page 666, ironically enough, is his fight with Perrin. And along with the continually distorted and harsh visions that he's giving himself about men, uh he also is doing that with Perrin. And each time he has this, kind of waking nightmare, he doesn't hold back and he actually does kill his friend. And we've already seen a couple of times with his interactions with Matt and Perrin that he's growing increasingly frustrated with who he is around them now, that he can't just be Rand anymore. He has to be the Dragon Reborn. And so that was part of the setup to this, were those interactions in the last couple of books where he's becoming more and more the dragon instead of Rand.
Mm-hmm.
And he resents it, and it makes him feel, well, it makes him feel not himself, because that's not him. he's not the dragon. That's just the title. He's Rand, and he until the very end of the series he can't reconcile that. So in that sense, it makes it makes sense that he would put himself in this state because he was already there, you know, basically. He was already there both consciously and unconsciously.
Hmm.
And now here's something that's really finally just pushed him over the edge because he does have such a close connection with Min that you can see how that's going to be the thing that kind of pushes him over the edge into just full raving madman.
Hmm.
Um, so 668 is when he walks in and Min has decided that, all right, if you're just gonna avoid me, then I'm gonna make it to where you can't avoid me. Um, Sheepherder, you look like what the dogs fought over. Now I understand why Alana was so frantic, even if I don't see how she knew. She practically begged me to speak with you after the maidens turned her way for about the fifth time. Dundera wouldn't have let me in if she wasn't in a lather about you not eating, and even so, I had to do a little begging myself. You owe me, country boy.
Which that statement there in his mental state, that can be
Hmm.
taken two different ways. She's saying it because she begged to get in there. He could take it as because I did that thing.
Hmm. And and you see that his reaction is to flinch. Physically flinches, and then all these terrible images that he's concocted keep uh flashing in his mind. Um, and then she says, "What are you talking about, sheepherder?" Um, this is where uh Min is so useful as a character, and also why she works so well as a character because she is our uh down to earth normal person in this fantasy world. And so she so often reflects the state of mind of the reader.
Hmm.
You know, she's the one who's just going to speak the normal common sense outsider looking in perspective. Uh, you
Which
know,
is funny. I don't know what popped in my head because I'm not an engineer, but isn't it funny that with the dynamic we have with Avienda, Elayne, and Min, it's like electricity. You have the AC currents, the alternating currents, and then you have the ground wire.
oh,
Min is the ground wire.
for both the reader and Rand,
Hmm.
which uh which is why she works so well for to ground the reader is because she's grounding these fantastical characters with the look, I'm just a country, bumpkin from a small town tending bar, but um that don't make no sense to me. What are you talking about, sheepherder? Uh and it comes through with the language she uses, down at the bottom of 669. So that's why you've been keeping me away, she said finally. You listen to me, you wooden-headed numbskull. And then we get into cancelable town here with problematic writing of women. I was ready to cry myself to dust because I'd seen one death too many, and you were about to do the same for the same reason. What we did, my innocent lamb, was comfort one another. Friends comfort one another in times like that. Close your mouth, you two rivers hay hair.
And this is where nurture overcomes nature. Comforted. If the women circle back home heard what we did called comforting, they'd be lining up to peel our hides if we were 50.
Wait, what? But him and Egwene were knocking boots back in Emmons Field, right in her parents' inn.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, geez. Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah. And somehow they were the same age, but
Yep. Um, and then Min continues to be problematic. Uh, do you think I'm a doll farm boy? Do you think I am too dim-witted to let you know if I didn't want your touch? Um, do you think I couldn't let you know in no uncertain terms? Her freehand produced a knife. Women aren't supposed to need men anymore. That's was the was it, which feminist was it that said a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle?
I don't know which one that was, but I don't know. Have you seen the fancy new toys these days? Oof.
That's not what we're talking about exactly, although that's part of what she's talking about. To the previous paragraph of Min's of comforting, of we needed each other.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we needed that connection.
Well, and yeah, realistically, we needed something powerful enough to override the depression we were under. And guess what? That same thing I keep harping on, that one thing we do that's powerful enough to override our survival mechanisms, because it's the only thing costly to us in this world is reproduction. Everything else is about survival.
Yep.
And oh my gosh, if death doesn't trigger that even more, or at least the thought of death, like a scary experience.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, so thoughts on as the conversation progresses and she finally, you know, batters down the warped walls of his psyche. And they actually have the talk, I guess. They actually talk about a relationship. And so the bottom of 671 is Min yelling at him that you uh you can't just send me away somewhere safe. And he says back, I don't love the maidens. So he can put them in harm's way. Well, or he can allow it. He doesn't like it.
Yeah, he didn't like
Um,
it.
well, Min said, straightening. A small smile added more curved to her lips. That's out of the way. Um,
And then he goes to ruin it again.
yep. I love Elayne too, he said brutally. And Avienda, you see what I am? Again with the self-loathing, again with the with Min grounding everybody here of Rourke loves more than one woman, so does Bale, and I never noticed any Trolloc horns on either. Um, but I think you've mentioned this before. a big part of why she's so accepting of this uh to her experience completely and totally, for all she talks about the ideal, for her this is a totally abnormal relationship. Um, but to her it's fated. So, and I think that's kind of her point of view, um, way back when she's talking to Elayne back in Celadar is, you know, or even back in the Great Hunt when she finds him after his fight with Balsamon, of thinking that, I tried to fight it, I tried to ignore it, but it's fated. Same thing with
Mhm.
Avienda, uh, when she finally did accept it. But for her, I mean, you see Elaine's uh point of view, both with Min and with Avienda, of I don't really like this, but this is what I have to do, so I'm going to do it.
Mhm.
And then he needs a bath because he stinks. I mentioned this when we were done recording last time, that it's interesting to me, and I wonder if it's a bit symbolic that um it's not just he's been in such a state he hasn't been taking care of himself, that is there more to the physical aspect of the bath, of he's washing away all of the nasty dark thoughts as well.
Mhm.
So I wonder if that part of it is also
Well, I
was
mean,
also in Jordan's mind.
yeah, there's metaphor with the bath, definitely, and for good reason because I mean, things that are mentally unclean tend to correspond with things that are physically unclean. And so, I mean, over the course of, thousands of years, we've just put the two together in our mind. We like to compartmentalize things because it makes life easier. Or
Then
I
you
guess
get
this would
a
be more, we like to associate things because it makes life easier.
then we get to yet another kind of big moment here in this chapter where a lot's going on, which is um 675, talking about a viewing of him. There's only one really. I was exaggerating. I saw you and another man. I couldn't make out either face, but I knew one was you. You touched and you seemed to merge into one another, and Rand takes that immediately to be, I'm not just insane and hearing voices.
Mm-hmm.
There really is another being in there. It's me and Luce Theron, and he's elated. Um, any other thoughts on oh, and then the interaction with the maidens and men as they come in, and the banter between her and the maidens as he's taking a bath, and uh the bit of emasculation there.
I don't, I wouldn't call it emasculation. It's teasing.
Yeah, true. All right. That is all of we've got for today. We'll go into then all of the stuff that happens after his bath, which leads to the climax of the
What do you,
book.
what do you think? Two more episodes?
Yeah, yeah, probably two more. Um, do you have any spoilery thoughts?
I alluded to them earlier, but nothing that popped out here other than
Yeah.
I would love to. Okay, spoiler time. Okay, we're spoiler time and comment time. Uh, so leave if you're reading for the first time. But I don't know if it's much of a spoiler, but what the interaction we get with Morden and Mohidian, I would actually, and we know this is a spoiler part of it, is we know Morden is Ishi reborn. I would have loved to see more of a collaboration than a conquering kind of thing between the two, because they're like the two that kind of get it. You know, Mohidian from a standpoint of I'm actually kind of weak, but I understand, and Ishi from the philosophical intellectual standpoint where he gets the ultimate end game, where the other ones tend to just be in it, in it to win it. And they don't understand that if the dark one wins, they lose.
All right.
Comments. Which one are you starting at? Because I can never remember if it's going up or down or up here. I think Jordan was too busy laughing at the Tamandrid theorist. He didn't want to do anything that would clear the waters. Yeah, we complained about Demandrid not getting any airtime.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's I think we touched on it, but you're absolutely correct there, Scott. That I think it helped a little bit in the end with the surprise, but at the same time, I think it took away from the by 14 books. If it was just like the beginning of one book to another where he disappeared to have a surprise, but at the end of 14 books, you just stopped caring about Demandrid, and when he showed up again, you're like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. He was known to lurk around some of the forums and boards, and so he was familiar with a number of the fan theories and the debates and discussions that went on, and he was known to take a bit of sadistic joy in it. So I would not be surprised if he did not alter his plan for Demandrid because of the widespread debate and discussion on the Temandrid theory,
Mm-hmm.
and that so he had Taim in there more and more to feed that, knowing that it was a red herring.
Mm-hmm.
Um, to Scott's point, if we had seen Demandred too much more, we might have, you know, it might have been easier to poke holes in that.
I wouldn't expect the TV show to do anything Jordan-esque. So far, it hasn't been Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time in any sense. What you got was Rafe Judkins' Wheel of Time. This,
Oh,
yeah, I remember what we were talking about. Would spur this comment is I was being very optimistic, but admittedly, I was being very optimistic in the sense that please, 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 world go right one of these times. Uh, and when you look at the scene of Hollywood, sometimes they try to right the ship and it's too little too late. It, at this moment, it wouldn't be too little too late if he at least got 50% on board with the source material.
yeah. Well, because um, then it would at least look like an adaptation. That, to Scott's point, it was so wrong, so different that it wasn't Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time.
Yeah, it
This,
wasn't it wasn't an adaptation, it was a change of story. And that's
mhm.
the thing. You see those the snarky people that love the series posting their shit that's like such and such adaptation, and then the other part of the meme is, yeah, that's the point of an adaptation. It's like, no, it's not an adaptation. You just take something from adaptation is you take something from the written word, which has a lot of freedoms that you don't have with the showing, the play or the theater, and then you adapt it in the ways that allow you to do that. Whether it was, okay, we don't have the technology to show the weaves, so we're going to make magic look a little different. That would be an adaptation. Whereas we're just going to change the whole goddamn story because we want it to, celebrate women and homosexuality as they did in this one, and make it more adult. So they're fucking in the first episode in the middle of the inn when the women's circle would have stripped their hide in the books. That's not an adaptation. That's changing it. Having Perrin kill his wife that he never had in the books is not an adaptation. That's
Yep.
changing it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've used the Peter Jackson uh Lord of the Rings a lot as a comparison for good reason, because you could watch that and yeah, some stuff had been changed, like taking away Elrond's sons and having Arwen do those things, but she was still doing the same things and she was still there in the story and in the source material, and they were just highlighting that because they had to condense a lot of things. They might take a line from Return of the King and put it in the Fellowship movie because it worked really well there and helped fuel the richness of the world. They weren't making up their own crap.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes you've got to do a little. You've got to spend a few episodes of building that aren't exactly action-packed story. Like the best example I can think of off the top of my head is Spartacus. If you watch the first 3 or 4 episodes of Spartacus, you're kind of not into it, but they're putting so much backdrop into the character himself, and then they pound you home. I think it's the 4th or 5th episode where he goes into the pits, and you're like, holy shit, this is a show. And it just shocks you into reality. So they could have done that. They could have spent 2 or 3 episodes, and the real fans would have kept watching. That's the thing. These shows nowadays, they're geared around the short attention span.
Mm.
But millions of viewers had an attention span of 14 books that took 20 something years to write. We would have been there. You would have had your numbers. You would have been okay. Spend 4 or 5 episodes explaining who Moiraine is, explaining who Reanne is, explaining who Lan is, bringing Min in when she should have been brought in. I don't mind the actress, and actually that's not a horrible way they brought her in here, but it would have been better if we just spent some time.
Yeah, because she becomes very integral to the story going forward, so you want to know who the heck she is.
Yeah. Even if it was just somebody you kind of like she is in the book, somebody you kind of just meet, and then later she pops, like season 3, she pops back up or something, which is what realistically happens in Lan's life. You kind of meet her while Rain does something with her, maybe just meeting with her in silence, and you don't even know what it is, but you understand she's important. And then you bring her back in season 2 or season 3, and the fans would have known just by the name. And then anybody else would have been like, holy crap, she's important by season 3, which you would have got just by reading it. So that one was an adaptation instead of a change, a complete change. But at the same time, it still could have been done even better. I remember the Lord of the Rings hate when the films came out from the people who were just purists of the books. I bet you all of them are looking at the Wheel of Time version. The crossover fans are like, thank you, Peter Jackson. We take back everything we said.
All right, this is more of a you comment. I have to disagree strongly. Tylan doesn't want Matt for protection or security. She's a queen of limited power, true, but she's just plain used to having her will over people. This is Jordan using an inversion of familiar sexual dynamics. I think that was all he intended to illustrate.
There is an element of that, but think of Beslin's comment about it's how long it's been.
Yeah.
She could have done this at any time, and there are plenty of powerful people for her to do that with. Why Matt? Well, part of it is the Tavarin thing, of course, but part of it is his charm. But the other part is Matt is unique in what he can offer her. She could have solidified her line. She could have built more power by doing this with another noble house in Ebou Dar. And it would have strengthened her and it would have created something that would be lasting. But then if she had a child with that person and it happened to be a boy, it would have hurt Beslan. Right. So we look at the Matt situation. He strengthens her line without threatening Beslan at all. Because if she was to accidentally have a child with him, I'm kind of guessing on age here, but she seems to be somewhere in her 40s. Thinking of how, because Beslan is what, about 18 at this point, because he's the same age as Elayne. So he's somewhere around 18, and women would typically have a child around 18 to 20 in this day and age, especially in royalty, because they're trying to do that to keep the lineage going. So she's probably late 30s, early 40s. She's not infertile yet. She has not hit menopause. So if she were to have a child with another royal family in Ebou Dar, Beslan would be out because the two ties together would be greater than the one. And Matt offers all of those things without the risk to her son. So it's not about the what she's doing, which you would be correct with the what she's doing. It's about the who she picked, why she picked who she picked.
Right. And we've got a new commenter, All Dan. Hi, Dan. Man, I just finished gathering storm on my reread to wash the filth of the show from my mind. There's no way they can fix what they did without completely starting again from scratch, in my opinion. It would certainly be really darn hard. In large part because they've already done so much damage, not just to the story, the real damage is to the characters. I mean, you brought up one today that I hadn't even thought of, was the silly river pushing scene as metaphor for surrendering to Sidar. Okay, then why can't Nyneave consciously channel? Why does she have so much trouble? I mean, as a major component, here we are on book 7, and she's just now getting past it.
And it took the combination of her basically dying and Lan showing up again for it to happen.
And that's just one of the characters, and that's a major problem that you've already established. I mean, it would be really hard to change course without, at least to some degree, ignoring the first season. So,
which shows have done that before.
Yeah, I mean, I think perhaps it's different, but along those lines was the change in what was the character's name? The actor in Game of Thrones.
The Thousand Sons leader.
Yeah. So it's like between season 3 and 4 when you first meet him, and all of a sudden there's this blonde guy, and I'm going, who the heck is that? And it took me like an episode and a half to realize.
No, he was originally the blonde guy.
And then he was
then he was the dark
other way around.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
So I was completely confused as to who the heck is this person. But
well, we're gonna get that. We're gonna get that with Wheel of Time, because remember they changed Matt.
Yeah.
He's now the I guess the poor man's version of Tom Holland. So that's the look they went with, anyways.
We'll see how that goes. All right. Well, that's all I got. You got any other?
No. Well, we appreciate the comments. Like, share, subscribe. Send us to somebody else reads the books. And we'll see you next week. It's Easter weekend, but we should be on schedule for Tuesday. Yep. And then we'll finish out these books in probably about 2 weeks.
Hopefully. All right, we'll see y'all then.
Later.